Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest, Cammy. What up, Cammy?
Hey, Bryant, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Thank you.
I'm trying to get my bearings. We've had a nice two-parter. We recently revisited the Arabian Nights. That was fun, talking about Aladdin. And we also had some fun Greek myth with the Sword of Damocles, because that's what we do here on Mythstorie. So we like to grab legends, topics, anything you can think of as far as myth or history goes. Then Cammy tries to kind of spin a tale of the story, and then we have a discussion about kind of the history and background. And today's episode is really fun. It's going to be the Wyvern. It's a hard word to say, surprisingly. But wyverns. So, what is a wyvern? Cammy, how would you, if you were in wyvern school and you had to answer the question, what is a wyvern? What would you say?
So I have come across so many different ideas of what it really is. Now,
Okay.
if you were to look at a picture of a dragon
Yep.
and a picture of a wyvern, the difference is that the dragon has 4 legs and the wyvern has 2 legs.
Yeah. That kind of is the basic main difference between the two.
Right. But I have found so many differences.
Sure.
So yeah, dragons breathe fire, for
Mm-hmm.
instance. Wyverns don't, although they can breathe
Yeah.
pestilence.
Yeah. That's a key. That's a key that I've seen as well.
And they also have, sometimes they have a second head on their tail.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and a lot of the dragons that we see today, and actually I took the myth that I'm using is a dragon myth.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but earlier, basically before it was written, when the story was kind of being thought of and that sort of thing by other people before this guy wrote it down, some people say it was a wyvern.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I like to think like, because a lot of this is from the Middle Ages, from where we get all of this. And I like to think like these peasants, like working the land in England, and they're like, "Look at that, it's a dragon!" And then the one peasant in the back was like, "No, I think that was a wyvern. I didn't see it before." Oh, screw off, dude. So it is. Yeah, we'll of course get into it, but we'd love to hear your story first, Cammy. So please regale us with a story of dragons slash wyverns, if you will.
okay. And this came from History of the Kings of England by Geoffrey of Monmouth. And I went with yorku.ca was the website that had the entire book there if you want to read it. It's really interesting.
Mm,
It talks about like the Roman sort of invasion, and that's where it starts, and then it goes through the ages where they built London and all this stuff. So it's kind of cool.
yeah,
But I hope I'm saying his name right. Vortigern?
sounds right.
Sure. All right. Vortigern, the newly established king of Britain, found a place to build his kingdom. It was perfect in its beauty and security. He drained a pond of its water and set out to make a foundation. But before construction on his castle could begin, 2 dragons, one of pure white and one red, sprang forth from the earth in battle, each chasing the other to each end of the lake, the battle never ceasing. But at the end of the battle, the red dragon will overtake the white. So was the prophecy of Merlin. Merlin was just a boy at the time, and no one knew of his magical abilities. He spoke of the red dragon being seized upon for many years by the white. The red dragon would spill so much blood that the rivers of Britain would run red with it. The valleys would appear to bleed too. The white dragon would oppress the people the red represented through destruction of their worship and temples. But a boar would at last bring aid to the battle. He was known as the boar of Cornwall. This boar would drive out the Gauls, but a wyvern of German origin and a sea wolf would come and join the battle too, to feed on the scraps of men caught up in struggle. The German worm would bring with it pestilence and famine. This dragon will reign over the land for 300 years, but the red dragon shall not be counted out. He is hid and grieved for his land for too long, the white dragon and the German dragon destroying his legacy. So he rises, his strength regained. He brings ill fortune to the white and demolishes the children of the invading forces. The cities of their people will be decimated, and the true victory shall be his. But first, the white and the German dragon would join forces again and try to slay their enemy, who must retreat to the far end of the pond. He will plot their demise, and he, along with the help of a lion, shall defeat both for good. The victory will stand, and the red dragon will retreat from battle, confident in his triumph. He will leave the fighting to the mortals, lesser animals, such as men, will take up arms to conquer nations and defend the kingdom he fought so long to protect. He will be remembered in the statues and histories and flags of his people. Though the lion will take the crown, the people of his land will know it was he who fought for so many 100 years to bring them freedom.
Ooh, that's a lot of imagery there. That's really cool.
Yeah.
The lion. I also like sea wolf. That's a common term for a Viking. That was like what they were known as, the sea wolves and the men of the north. So that's really interesting. Yeah. God, ancient Britannic. That's where this all kind of really rounds up in, and that's really, I thought that was really interesting too. The Germanic dragon. I've never really seen like it known like in that sort of a specific way.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too. They called him like a worm for most of it.
Yep.
And the worm being basically the wyvern who doesn't have the arms, so he's bringing the pestilence. So
right.
It just kind of made sense.
Yeah, and that's so that's what I didn't even look into, like the worm thing, Wyrm, which is really similar to Wyvern, Wyvern. And so yeah, the key is a wyvern today, and I guess honestly I think it's like D&D that's really like set the standard now, like of denoting the differences,
Sure.
And that's why I like to think of it like a wyvern's like a chicken. It's a chicken dragon. Its arms are its wings and its legs are its legs, but it otherwise is very dragon like, but it doesn't walk on all fours like a typical dragon may. And the word wyvern can be traced through French to the Latin word vipera, which was used by the Romans, obviously. And it's literally vipera. So if you think about what they are known as, of spreading poisonous pestilence, remember this was like miasma theory time. So like the air, like, like sickness was in the air. That's kind of how it was. So worm, I wonder if that, and like W's were very commonly V's, in a way. So wyvern, viper, it's all very, they all are extremely like closely related etymologically. At least definitely with wyvern, maybe, but I guarantee you worm, Wyrm would be tied into those. It must be. So from the Latins, it comes from them. We don't really have like the exact usage. I mean, the pantheon of beasts in Roman and Latin culture is deep. We've talked about gorgons a lot and how they go, ancient, like 2500 BCE. So it's not surprising to think of like a dragon-like beast, wyverns being dragon-like beasts to be in their idea, their circle for a very long time. But we do know that in Europe in the 5th century AD, they were on Roman war banners. And it looks like even some of the local sort of the settlers in Britain, the British Islands, actually kind of adopted it. They saw it and they're like, that's badass. And they were like, let's take it. It said there's no definitive proof, but it said that I think it was Mercia had a golden dragon as one of its banners, but I think that was just speculation. I don't think that we have any like definitive proof. I used, it was pretty easy on the sources here. I used started off with Wikipedia, of course, but mythology.net, and I always love these sites. Monster.fandom.com was another one I used, and it's really fun, again, because when you start like Googling this, it instantly is like D&D or video games or that kind of thing. And
Final Fantasy, I think, came up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like that is 100% one of the big ones too. And because Final Fantasy is really cool because it's an Eastern take on Western mythology in a way. So it's made in Japan, but it was heavily inspired. So like even the old ones are heavily inspired by like the medieval periods and this stuff. But yeah, so they typically myth.net or mythology.net says barbed tail on the end, two legs to give them that unique movement, very serpent like. Think of viper, and that they spread pestilence, not fire. And they corrupt where they are. So like literally just their being will degrade. Think of the miasma theory. Just their being will degrade like the ability to live in an area. Um,
That's really interesting because
mhm.
there's just a new video game, but there's a basically a LARP or like a tabletop game called it's the White Wolf universe,
Sure.
and it's called Werewolf, and they have a worm that is spreading
Oh, cool.
evil,
Yeah.
yeah, through the world or whatever, and the
Right.
werewolves are fighting against it. So
That's really
it's
cool.
super
That kind of goes with
interesting.
your story in a way too.
Yeah.
Um, and that's really that's the cool thing. Mythology.com or .net, excuse me, also says that they are sometimes called dragonettes. Sometimes I've never come across that before. I think I guarantee you that's like a newer kind of idea.
Like a
Um,
little dragon.
right, but that is the idea. They're typically not known as being uh, big as far as like older texts go to. Um, but it really, so while we do know of their sort of importance in Roman like culture as far as being on war banners and things like that, it doesn't seem like they really go in a bigger area. So like I think kind of comparing it to a Gorgon might be appropriate here, although Medusa being the most famous Gorgon in a way, as well as her sisters. But it was a beast. It was just a beast. You know, you might have found bones that kind of, you know, maybe dinosaur bones, something like that, and you'd explain if it kind of looked like it, that it was a viper, a wyvern of some kind. And so it kind of makes sense that it kind of took this meaning. And I haven't, nothing I read really tied in the miasma theory mindset of the time. But we've talked about that. I can't remember what Greek, it was a Podicus Magnus that we did with Peter. We talked about miasma theory.
We
Um,
we did, but then we also talked about it during the plague episode, didn't we?
Yeah, the village of Eam. Yeah, that was a really good one too. And so yeah, we've definitely addressed it, and it was yeah, it was a theory of thought from that only ended like in the 20th century because you know science. Um, One cool thing from this is so again we have the roots in mainly Roman culture, which very likely may have been influenced by the Greek culture. Again, there's no definitive sort of thing here. There was Wikipedia mentions that this idea, the symbology might have been first encountered in a Greek land of Dacia, from where Trajan got it. They think that there was definitive evidence of Trajan having it, getting it from the Dacians, and that how that in turn Trajan going to Britannia. That's how it gets introduced to
Yeah,
places
the
like
Dacians had it
Wales.
as a banner,
Okay, all right.
and it's on Trajan's, what is it? Trajan's Tower?
Right. Yeah. And and like because there's a point after this where we start seeing like the Welsh dragon, and then where there's mentions of the golden dragon in Wessex and other places in the British Islands. So, but the big thing was that really helped push it was the medieval period, and specifically medieval bestiaries. And I kind of took that word for granted. In a video game like Final Fantasy, they'll sometimes offer a bestiary where you fight a monster, then you can read about it and it'll tell you its weaknesses and what it does, and sometimes we'll have a cool lore write up. But like these things were legit compendiums of medieval times and before that too. The word bestiary comes from bestiarium vocabulum. And it's a compendium of beasts. I'm reading directly from Wikipedia. So this goes as far as the ancient world, trying to map what your world is, and it can be anything. It could be of plants and even stones. So apparently, some dudes were like going out and being like, "I need to write this rock down and explain this rock." One really cool thing here, and this is something I didn't know, and that's on mystery. I always like to try and we're not experts on almost anything, but I just want to like kind of scratch the brain in a little way, and this is really what scratched it here, other than the whole viper etymology. So the natural history and illustration of each beast was usually accompanied by a moral lesson. So like bestiaries back in the day, it looks like they were very poetic, and I'm looking at some like examples that were written in some old language, medieval era, but it looks like so they were trying to sort of explain like this is the best way I can draw a weird bear, and here's a moral lesson, and it was usually tied to God, so it was trying to say things like, this was something created by God, this is God's world, and this is the reason why it's made, this is the moral of it, and that in turn just makes me think of the whole reason we have like folk tales and like
Sure.
Hansel and Gretel and things like that. So it seems like it's really big on that. And the medieval period, it makes sense. This was probably one of the more stable times for Christian literature to sort of exist, and Christians were the only ones that were like, I gotta write that down for a very long time. So it was just really cool. I thought that was a really unique way of sort of understanding what a bestiary or bestiary is and their points and things like that. One other thing. So I mentioned how it pestilence is sort of the big thing. We have some other evidence as the wyvern, which so the wyvern really symbolizes disease. And Wikipedia mentions how there's a symbol of a wyvern or a viper sort of thing being overcome by Apollo, which symbolizes medicine. So that was like defeating this viperous being. That's how you save people. And that makes sense. Again, pestilence, miasma theory. This beast literally, like its being will degrade like the atmosphere, the life, the biome that it's in. And then someone like Apollo being like, no, get out of here, and punching him. And that fixing thing. So my last fun thing was, of course, Cammy's tale being about the British Islands. Visitwales.com had a fun little write up because the dryag is on the Welsh flag, one of the few countries that has like a straight up dragon on its flag. And they mention too in their sort of little write up, much like how we've used like CelticWeddingRings.com in past episodes. The dragon appeared on the battle flags of various British soldiers on their way to Rome in the 4th century. It was later adopted by the 5th century Welsh kings who were keen to show their authority following the Roman withdrawal. So it kind of seemed like they were trying to, the Romans left and they kind of took that bit from them in a way.
This is an official thing. We're official now.
Yeah. I mean, like the Romans were, I'm sure, darned impressive, and adopting Roman culture was absolutely big. Even when the Romans were leaving, though, I mean, almost much of the continent was Christianized in a certain way. So Roman influence, while it escaped extremely quickly, it had a very lasting effect. I mean, the Roman walls and buildings and floors that are in England that are still there today are great evidence of that. Mm-hmm. And the Wales's official first use of the flag was probably during the Battle of Bosworth Field in England, 1485, when Henry Tudor defeated Richard III. The Pembroke-born English king went on to reign over England for 24 years as Henry VII. So yeah, just some really cool stuff. I always love seeing little write-ups on websites like that. But yeah, so Wyvern, it looks like it specifically comes from the Latin word vipera or vipera. Makes sense. Vipers, snakes, poison. There's a theme here of dragons and things like that. Typically, wyverns were sort of seen as being smaller dragons in a way, where their arms were their wings and their legs were their legs, and that was about it. They were known as pestilistic beings, very similar to what a snake would have been kind of talked about. So they were just sort of like flying snakes in a way, which again sort of makes sense. And winged snakes was something that Wikipedia mentioned in general, but it seems like it was just different enough, And if you think of what if you look at a wyvern, a typical picture of a wyvern and a winged snake, they are pretty different. I got to give a quick shout out before I finish my spiel. The game Monster Hunter does a really cool job of, that's what it calls almost all of its like batty dragony looking dudes, wyverns, and they all do have the only, you know, their arms, their wings, and their legs, and they do a really cool job of like showing you how they would move and how they would act and things like that. And they specifically do have dragons as well. They're typically called like elder dragons, and they're much more beefy and serious and devastating. But then you've got these lesser wyverns, and I thought that was really cool. And but they all share that feature. So as far as like I know a bestiary of medieval time was pretty much as informed as, you know, anybody else. But I like that this game did a really cool job of creating this like really in-depth bestiary in its own little universe. So, and of course things like D&D definitely go far today.
Is the dragon on the D&D thing, does it have feet?
I believe so. I believe it's a dragon.
Okay.
Dragon, yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Because
positive.
there's like a big red dragon on the cover of the book or whatever.
I'm pretty sure that's a dragon. You know, if we're denoting it between 4 and 2 legs and things like that. So cool. Well, guys, I hope everyone enjoyed this story. We've been enjoying our recent episodes, especially going into the new year now. We've got some fun stuff planned. Please check out too, if you want a little extra content. We've been doing some shows with Cody on his show Popular Opinion, POP, as in like the little figurines, because there's a bunch of myth-based Funko Pops. So we've done like Loch Ness, and we've got a few more coming up. So check out his channel. You can also, you know, Facebook.
That's on YouTube.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And our segment is called Funko Myths Explained.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, please join us on our Facebook group. I've got links in the description as well for some of our other channels like Twitter and Instagram. And I did recently make a Discord too. Feel free to jump in there. It's pretty it's in its infancy, but it's a fun way to kind of interact as well. So feel free to jump in there, and you can contact us directly. If you have any myths that you want us to talk about, please let us know, especially if it's something that's lesser known. We always love kind of diving into the things that people aren't talking about. So I think that covers it. Cammy, thank you so much for your story and your time.
Thank you, Bryant.
I think that covers it. Do you have anything else to add?
Not right now.
Very cool. Well, everyone, we will add more next time.
Oh.